As we get started, I first want to say hello. I'm Melissa Caponegro. I'm the director of the Quality Schools Initiative here at City Forward Collective, and excited to be on this call today with a few other City Forward Collective members. So if you guys can just turn off your mic really quickly and introduce yourself so we know who's in this space.
I'm Lenny, leadership coach with City Forward and director of curriculum and instruction with Seton Catholic Schools.
Patricia Hoban, executive director of City Forward Collective. Great to see you all here today.
Stephanie Manny, senior director of talent strategy and leadership development, and good to see so many old and new faces. So thank you for being here.
All right, as we get started, you can see on the screen that we've listed some norms. The norms on the left are things that you have probably seen before. And we have now added our virtual norms, which may not be new to you anymore. Now that I believe we're in week 8, is this, at working from home. And so you may have seen these as well. But again, we ask that your video is on. Best practice says that it's great to interact with one another through video. Use the chat as much as possible. So if you have questions or if you agree with someone, please feel free to shoot it in the chat box, just like we're having a conversation. Jump in with any questions that you have. And we just ask that you're muted if you are not responding, but please unmute yourself to respond to the group. Know that we are really flexible in this situation. As I'm sure you can all see and hear, my 5-year-old is running back and forth, washing her hands, in and out of the room. And so we know that you may have kids or fur babies or spouses coming in and out of the room, and we are flexible with that. And so thank you for giving me grace as well as my little one runs around behind me. So today we are really excited to continue the work with our high school leaders specifically. And we're looking forward to reviewing some highlights of the Catalyst Ed roadmap. It's something exciting that has just come to us that we want to share with you all, and we'll be really just looking at a couple components of it. And you'll have a chance to assess current practices in the areas of social emotional learning and monitoring and assessment in order to plan for the recovery phase of what we're doing as we move into our reentry plans. And so in the hour, we will take some time to set the stage. We'll have some breakout rooms where we can really dig into how we've responded to these 2 buckets and how we're planning moving forward. We'll have a space to come back and share out as a group. We'll talk a little bit about our school support funds and summer school, and then close out with some next steps. Again, if I am moving too quickly or you have any questions along the way, please feel free to throw them in the chat box. I'm going to pass the mic over to Patricia.
Great. So I just want to address, for those of you who are new, this is the 2nd time we've convened our high school principals as a subgroup. We've offered many more virtual collaboratives, which is a space we've moved into to try to support schools through this COVID-19 crisis. And what we have begun to think about, and I think people who are navigating the same thing in the education space are thinking about, is there's multiple phases to how this process is going to work. As an organization who's trying to support schools through this crisis time, our goal is that all of you will be up and running either virtually or in person next year, ready to go, not missing a beat, and having made sure that you have minimized any kind of equity gaps or achievement gaps that may have emerged because of the loss of school time this year or over the summer. And so we look at 3 phases. Phase 1, some of you are in, which is really just starting the response, dealing with emotional needs. I know some of our MPS partners are getting back over these last 2 weeks and really formalizing plans for offering teaching and learning. But that first stage is figuring out where people are, setting the stage, creating the first stages of a vision. Finding your children and finding your students. Phase 2 is where many in the city are working in that space right now of recovery. So you're beginning, you've been executing a plan, you're recouping some learning, you've begun to restore some community, hopefully, and you're executing your plans and beginning to think about, okay, we're coming to the close of the year. What are we going to be doing in summer school? And let alone what are we going to be doing through the start of the year? And then reinventing is where we hope we'll all get to eventually, which is how do we learn from the remote learning, the remote teaching that we took on throughout this time, and understand how it could move us forward in a different direction in terms of how we've been doing things in the past with our education programs and plans, how we're working with kids, how we're working with families, how we're providing resources moving forward, how we're providing professional development. And so what I'm going to be talking about at the end of this session is the City Forward Collective COVID-19 School Support Fund, which is money we've raised, all of which will go to schools to find their way, hopefully, to phase 3. And so what we heard last time is a couple areas of need that the high school principals had. We spent a lot of time last time talking about how we're going to graduate students and how we're going to do grading and things like that, but there were still a lot of concerns about supporting the social emotional needs, how we're going to assess where students are, how we're going to differentiate among students. And so what's really become clear through all these virtual connections is the need for a plan and some kind of a framework for planning that we can support schools through. We found a good articulation of this through an organization called Catalyst Ed, which is a national organization that provides supports to schools and districts. And they said, we believe that leaders know their organizational context and needs best, and we empower them with the information and supports they need to identify and connect with the right experts for their mission critical needs. And that's really the role we want to, we feel we've started to play at City Forward Collective and want to continue to play. Go to the next slide. So what I've been doing and our team members have been doing for the last couple of weeks is looking at different state frameworks for how to navigate remote learning and how to create plans to be ready to launch the school year the way I described earlier without missing a beat. And I think this Catalyst Ed has put together a framework that best captures what everybody has done and also kind of walks you through those 3 R's that I just went through, and Melissa's going to be talking about that in a minute. But I just want to highlight the components of the plan that we're hoping over now and over the next 6 to 8 weeks that you'll all be creating to relaunch next year with your leadership teams. So general program development and communication, what's your instruction vision, how are you connecting to students, how are you aware of their well-being or not, how are you supporting families through this process, instructional supports for teaching and learning, how you're managing this, what platforms you're using, how you're making sure that you've continued to support the development of your teachers through this new and unique work. And then also what the expectations of students are and how you're supporting them and their social emotional well-being. And there's a whole framework for that Melissa's going to touch on. Many people haven't even had the chance to really think through the differentiating learning needs. As many of you know, there's a lot of national attention in Philadelphia. Early on, that school district was, well, we can't give instruction to anybody because we can't support the needs of our special education students and other specialized populations. But indeed, people are out there doing that. What is the best practice there? We want to, we've heard a lot of seeking for advice on that. So we want to be able to support you in there. Feedback and data, we're hoping that what we'll be able to work on a little bit today is how are you going to know where your students are at the end of the year? And then what are you going to do with that information? Last time we talked about how are we tracking attendance, how are we tracking grading and promotion, but that's something there's still a lot of work to do. Not everybody has full attendance, and not everybody even knows exactly how to track that. So want to share some resources on that. And then post-secondary supports is a particularly important aspect of high school leadership and getting ready for that transition. And I know many of you have been called upon to support your students once they've already transitioned and are going through this crisis as well. Okay. Melissa, you're not on.
I swear if I had $1 for the amount of times that we say, you're on mute. I'm sorry. So today we're going to dig into really just 2 areas. So looking at assessing and monitoring learning, and then social emotional support. We are looking at this Catalyst Ed document as a guide, and then we're going to think about how it relates to plans that we already have, and really use it in the 3 buckets that we talked about earlier from Transcend, which is really about responding, recovering, and reinventing. And so when we go into our breakout groups, again, one group will be focusing on assessing and monitoring learning, the other on social emotional support. And then when we come back together, we'll be able to share out about what you read about within that document, and then how it relates to some things that you have already thought about as you plan for moving forward. So just a quick overview of what this document's going to look like when I share it in the chat, and you can head that way. We are going to be sharing the full document. It is a lot to take a look at. And so for the sake of our session today, we also have a 1-pager that just says breakout materials. And so I'm going to ask that you click on that. And when you have the time, you can go into the roadmap folder where you're going to be able to see all of these documents really listed out. And so, for example, this snapshot right here is just one piece of a much larger document. This one is specifically around monitoring and assessment, and it's broken up into these 3 phases. The way that Catalyst Ed breaks it down is around launch, finishing the school year strong, and then implications for summer and beyond. We've added the respond, recover, and reinvent because it's language that we have seen ourselves using a lot, and we want to make sure that we're tying what we're doing to what you're seeing today as well. And so that we're going to ask that when you're looking at the information, you're really thinking about this recovery piece. And so how are we recovering from our first response, really? We've already been in that space where we had to respond to what's going on. And so again, for today, we're going to focus just on the recovery, like how are we going to finish the school year strong? So again, this is a snapshot from the formative feedback and data, specifically in monitoring and assessment. You will have the snapshot in the doc that I send your way. In terms of the social emotional support, within the first doc, like I said, that we're not going to dig into the whole piece, but they have a whole separate roadmap just for social emotional support. And under that roadmap, there are 4 buckets around vision for social emotional student and family support, building connection, student and family well-being, and creating a fortified learning environment. So again, for the sake of today, we're only going to focus on one piece within that additional framework. And that is mainly going to be around this idea of vision for social emotional support. We have heard from so many stakeholders the need for support on this, but I think one of the things to think about is, yes, we need support, but what is our vision when we're thinking about social emotional family support and student support for our own schools and our own networks? And so taking some time to look at what Catalyst Ed has as the 3 phases of this, and then really narrowing down how it aligns with our recover plan and where we're at right now as we start thinking about next steps. Patricia, is there anything I'm missing with these before we talk about our breakout sessions? Good. Okay. I see a head nod. You're on mute, but I see a head nod. Okay, so we're good. So again, in your breakout sessions today, it's going to be 20 minutes to really dig deeper into these documents. So you're going to have 5 minutes just to review the information from Catalyst Ed. As I said, I'm going to throw a link into the chat box that will take you to a folder that has materials for breakouts. You'll see another folder in there that has the full roadmaps. Please take a look at those at a different time, but they are there for you. So you'll take 5 minutes just to review. Then you're going to take 5 minutes to reflect. Again, thinking about your plans in the recover column. And you're going to discuss amongst your group what you've thought about already in this space. And you can also start thinking about brainstorming as we go into that reinvent space of planning for next year and beyond. After that 10 minutes of discussion, we'll return to the main group to share out some themes that came up within our group. So a couple logistical items about the breakout session. When you're in there, I will throw some notes to you about the time that you have, and I will also throw a note capturing document if you feel that you want to take notes within that space, or if it's easier to just write them down and capture themes that way, that's fine as well. So give me 1 second and I'll set you up with your groups. In the meantime, I am sharing the Google Doc right now that has the items you will be looking at. There is a real thing about Zoom bombing, and so it no longer links automatically. You have to copy and paste it into your web browser so that somebody can't create their own link that it would click you on to something else. So
hey, Melissa, the only thing, do we want to add, just have one person identify from each group to kind of report out a summary of what the discussion was? And
yes, absolutely. In your group, you can volunteer or have someone volunteer somebody to come back and share the themes when we come back to the group. Before I break you out into your groups, are there any questions about what we're doing? You can feel free to throw any questions in the chat box or just unmute yourself, so I'm sure that there's understanding before we break into our sessions.
I think I just want to highlight that we're trying to introduce this planning process, and our goal over a period of time is to dig much deeper into each elements of that and to offer trainings around both for teachers and for leadership teams to navigate the various pieces of this. Again, all of this comes in response to what we've been hearing from you about what your needs are. So this is really just to get a flavor for what a plan components need to look like and where we're trying to drive toward.
Absolutely. All right, when I send you to your breakout rooms, group 1 will be focusing on that monitoring and assessment, and group 2 will be focusing on social emotional learning. And so we're just gonna have both groups share out, 1, about what you looked at in terms of your roadmap, and then 2, what were some themes that came up, again, as it relates to that recover spot of where we're at right now. So would group 1 like to begin?
So that's
Okay.
right.
Is that me?
Yeah, it is, Jody.
Okay, sorry. I was like trying to pull. I'm so sorry because I had that tinier document up and now I have too many windows open and I can't pull it up. So I'm just going to go with it. So basically, ours kind of focus on like grading in Q4 and like moving into fall. So we kind of shared a few thoughts that like people had wrapped like their heads around like being in virtual learning and getting a better grasp on where kids are. But Patrick at St. Anthony shared like that they're toggling between what's enough work to grant credits to make sure that it's authentic and that we're not just giving kids credits to give credits. I shared that seeds of health. We really had to kind of reel some teachers in this week. I worked a lot with principals and did a whole bunch of grading and failure analysis. We are staying with letter grades. We're expecting our kids to be working and engaged to earn credits, but we had this influx of teacher expectations. So we had to kind of really make sure that we came up with like a spreadsheet system to make sure kids are engaged and principals were calling home. But this fact that we don't need to grade every tiny assignment because sometimes that was hurting kids, and we kind of focus on longer term projects with check-ins each day to sign out points because we were losing kids or creating more failures when we were having so many assignments graded. So we kind of went through that. And then I just shared kind of like my own thoughts that right now we're toggling between what we're going to do at summer and really our fall plans. We know that we will be testing kids and using math as soon as fall starts, creating strands, intervention groups. We know that we're going to really be focusing on literacy and math in our younger grades and longer blocks, but that's kind of where we are at.
Great, thanks, Jody. Group 2, do you guys have any questions for Jody? Feel free to throw them in the chat box. Just unmute yourself and ask, and not just Jody, Group 1 in general. If you have any questions for Group 1, or if Group 1 has anything they want to add on to what Jody shared. I'll do the awkward virtual silence, which is always very hard for me, but.
So one thing that I wanted to add, and is this idea of, that was brought up about, thank you, Jody, for sharing, that about assessing, like taking inventory of learning from this time when kids have been out. So if you take inventory now of what kids learned and what happened in the virtual space, you'll have an idea of what needs to happen in brick and mortar when we go back.
Group 2 is focused on social emotional learning. John, if you want to share out what we talked about.
Sure thing. So we talked about some of the things we're currently doing. Lita mentioned that there's a virtual game night that they have and trivia nights. We talked about doing parent-teacher conferences still, sending out surveys to see how people are doing socially and emotionally. We also talked a lot about what next year looks like in the very beginning of next year and some early steps we can take to make sure that we are acknowledging this shared experience that we had with our students. Debbie mentioned that her school does induction days where the first 2 days are just students and staff getting together, moving around in homerooms where they're learning new policies, but they're also having time to socially interact with each other so that they can have an opportunity to see each other for the first time in 6 months. Not 6 months, but like 5 months, but it's been a long time for them. So just building in time in the beginning of the year for students and staff to be social with other human beings. We talked about having some kind of social aspect for daily or weekly, having wellness checks with students more regularly that don't just check in on them academically, but check in on them emotionally and socially. One of our biggest takeaways was like being able to connect and build relationships with students early on so that when and if this new virtual learning thing comes back into play again, we have a good relationship with students so that they have more buy-in when it comes to turning things in. We also talked about early on confirming phone numbers and email addresses that we have in file so that when we get into, if we get into virtual learning again, we're not struggling with, oh, this number is disconnected. Oh, this person doesn't have a phone number on file. This person doesn't have an email address on file. So just some ways to really start the beginning of the school year strong so that there are less issues along the way if and when this does happen, but also meeting our kids' social and emotional needs on a regular basis, even if we don't have virtual learning again.
Thanks for sharing, John. And again, if you guys have any questions around what John shared or anything for Group 2, please feel free to shoot them in the chat box. I do just want to make a quick note that we know that this is like just one toe in the water around planning as we're in this recover phase and then moving into reinventing and really planning for next year, because as we said, normal is not a thing anymore. We have to have a new normal and really determine what that looks like. And so this was one little piece to get our feet wet as we're starting to think about how these plans can look, how we're going to start rolling them out. The team at City Forward Collective is working extremely hard to figure out the best ways to support you all with those plans. And so we're looking at different exemplars and frameworks and making sure that we have a clear guide for you all as we're working towards next year. So again, I just wanted to make that note that this is just one little toe in the water. We know that this is a much bigger conversation, much more that needs to be discussed. But as these frameworks and roadmaps are coming to us, we want to share some ideas as we start to plan for next year. So with that said, again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box, but I'm going to turn it over to Patricia to share a little bit about our school support fund.
So, I just want to say that a little bit about our COVID-19 school support fund. We've raised about $750,000 to give to schools and school support organizations to help navigate through you know, a successful launch next year, and a launch that's going to recognize that it could be easily disrupted with back and forth virtual learning. So how do we be ready for that? Most of our investments, I want to say the Greater Milwaukee Foundation has created a large fund that's looking at education as one of 5 different issues it's supporting. They are supporting schools around the first phase, which is just getting technology or hotspots or internet service in place and funding some of that. We're going to be funding what we've been referring, you know, finishing the school year strong and implications for summer and beyond, mostly implications for summer and beyond. So we're going to be doing planning grants that'll be between 10 and 20,000 per school. The idea for those dollars would be to help pay stipends for teachers who you might be working with in leadership development, who can help you with various parts of the plan, for example. More that kind of thing than getting you more Chromebooks or something, because there are other resources and strategies for that. And then we're also going to be funding, we're going to look at who implemented what this spring with success and try to, if there's some best practices to scale, we'll be giving larger grants for scaling those best practices. We have a grant, for example, to TNTP that's going to help us with some workshops that, that will support you, that Melissa's going to talk about in a second. And then we're going to be funding a summer school. There is a proposal that's been funded with about $4 million in national funds, so that a virtual summer school will be available to those that want it. And this virtual summer school is responding to the equity issue that, you know, that we're seeing playing out here in Milwaukee. We always have a summer loss for kids, but now we have a spring loss and a summer loss. And so the goal of this National Summer School is to have kids back on track by the start of the year. It's being led by 3 large and very, very successful national charter networks. So there are master teachers being hired to create this curriculum, and then local teachers, which would be your teachers, would, if your school participated, would be hired to support the work. There will be training for the teachers, and really I would call it, it'll be a 6-week summer school. It'll be 6 weeks of professional development. We'll be sending more information out that, but we'll be providing some grants to schools that want to participate in that. And then in addition to the planning grants in the summer school, we'll be funding some innovative projects that we hope some of you all will have developed through the course of this work. And those are products of your work that we believe could be scalable and long-term integrated into just the work you do. Anything from how you do professional development to how you do teaching and learning and anything else. So that is a summary of that. And any MPS schools, I just want to point out, because we have some MPS school leaders, I'll be working with Dr. Posley to make the administration aware, but these would be direct grants to schools and not to the district to distribute to schools. So Stephanie, Melissa, and the team will give you more information in the next week or so as we publish the RFP.
All right, so thank you guys. Again, as we said, today is just one toe in the water of a much bigger picture that we know that we have to start planning. On the screen, there is a list of upcoming school leader collaboratives. 3 of these are going to be run by TNTP and then 1 by Valor Collegiate in Nashville. And so I really want to point out the one on May 28th. That will be a direct connection to what we were talking about today, and they will really start with moving forward with that reentry planning process and align to some things that we discussed today as well. The messaging for this has gone out in a couple different ways. There has been a collaborative list with the registration links as well as our program updates. And so at this point, I'm sure you've gotten a lot from us, and you will continue to get a lot from us as we message the different opportunities coming up to participate in some new learning. And so these are specific for leaders. Please feel free to sign up. We would love to have you there. And as we close out the session, I am going to put a survey in the link, but if it doesn't work, no worries. I will follow up with an email because I know there's been some issues today. And so I'm going to assume this might not work as well. If it works, great. Fill out the survey, type done when you're finished. And then we just wish you all a great rest of the week. We appreciate you attending this session. And thank you to the team at City Forward Collective for supporting with this session. We will stay
Melissa,
behind.
You're going to be, I just want to note, you're going to email all of the full documents to everybody that was on this list, right? Because they didn't get those. So
Absolutely.
they can really dig deep into those.
I just want to
Yep,
say
absolutely.
thank you guys very much. It was very informative. I appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Phyllis. And yes, I will make sure that you all have the links that will work when I send them via email with all of the complete roadmaps. If you all need anything, we'll be staying behind for a little bit to answer any questions. Thank you all again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Melissa. A reminder to all the leaders that we are having ongoing sessions for the teachers also. So as you are receiving that communication, please make sure that you are pushing those out to your staff. You are also welcome to join. It really is a great opportunity to hear what's going on in their heads and in their minds as you are planning on next steps. And for those that are interested, as Melissa said, in participating or maybe submitting a grant, I do highly encourage you to continue to drop into these sessions, because each time you'll learn a little bit more about how you're going to diagnose where you are and where your next steps are and support you in that process.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you. Hey, I'm not sure if it's Melissa or if it will be a Stephanie question. I get some communications for some things. Can I just make sure I'm on all of the listservs? Because I want to make sure I don't miss any of the next ones coming up.
Lita,
Yes,
which one are you
Lita.
on? Are you getting the one specific for the program updates, or did you get one just that had collaboratives?
I did not get one for those. I think I got one yesterday, today from Stephanie.
Yes. So I have
Okay.
Lita on a different list. And so Lita, what I'll do is attach you, Melissa will attach you to the collaborative list, but I'll attach you to the Burke list. So then I'm not one-off emailing you.
Okay.
Thanks
that's
for
what's
letting
happening.
us know, Lita. I appreciate that. We will add you to the list.
Thank you. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.